The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. That over yonder is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, the weather has gone from lovely to even more lovely outside. Are you getting your healthy dosage of sun every day?
Probably not.
You're staying indoors?
For the most part, it's tough with infant. We can bring them outside a little bit, but we've spent a little bit of time on our deck, but not a ton, not as much as we probably should.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've been taking some long walks every day, about 2-mile walks. So it takes me a good, half hour-ish or whatnot, trying to set a better pace every day. But yeah, that's the extent of my outdoorsman activity.
Right.
Outside of taking the dog outside to, do his business.
Right.
But yeah, so we have a special podcast, I guess, for you today. A little more Minnesota Wild topical related podcast, even though that's what we've tried to do before. We veered into other specific areas, but today we're going to do something we've done years previous. We're going to kind of fast forward this one a little bit because we're not sure what kind of an off season we're going to get when the 1920 season ends. So we're going to construct our 2021 Minnesota Wild roster. Ben and myself will each sit in the general manager's chair, and we're going to put down our moves, and we're going to build the roster that we think will be best for this team. There are a few ground rules we had to establish before building said roster. They are as follows. Given the pause to the 1920 season, we've, and based on the last report I saw, it looked like the salary cap was not going to go up any more than what it was this year, which was $81.5 million. So we're leaving the salary cap at $81.5 million. Also, any trades involving draft picks will be for 2021 or beyond due to the 2020 draft happening before you're allowed to make any of these types of moves. And then also we are going under the rule that no players signed to entry-level contracts off of the reserve list will be allowed to play in the remainder of the 1920 season, which we've noted a bit before does affect the Wild a little bit. So those were the general parameters we set for these moves, and that is all we had. So we were going to kick it off, and we're going to give Ben the floor to give us his roster.
Okay, so just general theory-wise, my thought on it is I'm not expecting to build a cup contender next season, right? I know that that's tempting to do, and obviously with Kirill Kaprizov, hopefully, underline hopefully, being on the team next season, you're gonna, a lot of people want to push all their chips in and go out and sign all the free agents they possibly can, and that kind of deal. I was thinking more of a slow build, not a slow build necessarily, but just at least next season, kind of seeing what you got with some guys, and I'll get into that. But I didn't go nuts with free agents, with one exception, and there's some reasons for that. So I'll get into it. I did not make any trades. Trades are hard to pull off, and as we've noticed with a lot of rumored trades around the Minnesota Wild, whether it be Jared Spurgeon or Jonas Brodin or et cetera, unless you're Paul Fenton looking to get rid of guys and or Paul Fenton looking to acquire, quote unquote, your guys, trades are hard to pull off. So I didn't make any, which also kind of ties in with the slow build thing. And I do think there probably will be some trades, but maybe, especially right now, maybe into next season or even possibly after the season, because we've got that expansion draft looming. So that kind of was big on roster construction is that expansion draft is coming, and there's a lot of things to that, and I don't know how many moves people will be able to make even this summer, just given all the uncertainty. So that's just kind of my general theory. As far as actual moves, I did sign a couple of free agents. I should say I re-signed several guys for the Wild. Jordan Greenway, Luke Cunnin, re-signed them. They're RFAs. That's pretty straightforward stuff. I did re-sign friend of the show, Sam Annis, or I should say show is the fan of Sam Annis for the forward group. I also obviously signed Kirill Kaprizov. That maybe is wishful thinking. We've talked about the possibility of him being in Russia for just one more season, which is painful, and the NHL is 110% squarely to blame for that. But I'm just trying to be optimistic about it and think that he is here next season. Also, another person that I pulled up, from the minor reserve is Alex Kovanov. He's only 20 years old, and he just spent his whole season in the Q, the Quebec Junior League this year. But he scored 99 points in like 54 games or 52 games or something like that. And there's been some talk about him wanting to end up in the NHL sooner rather than later, and kind of using some leverage as far as the leverage that he does have with, if he's not in the NHL sooner rather than later, then he could pursue other opportunities and whatnot. So I'm willing to give this kid a shot. He's only 20 years old, but we've seen more and more lately in the NHL. This is a young man's league, and this guy is very talented. He was a diamond that they found in the third round a couple of seasons ago, and I think that with a talent like that, with somebody who's that productive, and somebody who wants to be in the NHL, and somebody who we think can play in the NHL at some point, I'm willing to give it a shot. And this is kind of goes along with my general theory of kind of a little bit of a slow build, kind of giving some guys some looks as you kind of build around Kirill Kaprizov, and what better way than giving a fellow Russian some time on the NHL team along with Kirill. Not to say that they necessarily have to be best friends instantly, but it does give him someone else, another countryman that could help him adjust to North American hockey, as Kovanov has spent a couple of years now in Canada playing in juniors. So that was kind of my theory. One UFA that I did sign from outside, actually for forwards, is an old friend of ours, Giles, someone that you met in Las Vegas. And that's Eric Hall.
Why are you doing this?
Eric Hall is a free agent this year, and he has had a tough couple of years. Injuries have really taken him out. But he's not that old. He's I believe 29 right now, something like that. So I'm not afraid to give him a pretty low risk contract to come in and kind of be a top or a bottom six center. I'm not enamored with Victor Rask in any way, shape, or form. In fact, in this particular roster that I set up, I did buy out, or no, I believe I buried Victor Rask. So sent him down to Iowa. He doesn't have a no movement clause. If he does not clear waivers, I would be shocked, but you'd also let him go. So I actually buried Victor Rask in Iowa, and just kind of took the hit on his cap for one more season. And then, obviously we've talked about maybe waiting until just before the final year of his contract to buy him out, because he does have 2 years left, and that would be a pretty tough pill to swallow. So I signed Eric Halla. So that gives me kind of my forward group in addition to the guys that are already under contract. So just a real quick rundown. I've got Prezi Suter Fiala, Prezi Stahl Fiala at the top line, Zuccarello, Eriksson, Kaprizov, Foligno, Kovanov, Donato, Greenway, Annis, Cunnin, and Hartman and Halla Maybe Annis and Hartman are kind of the extra forwards there as it works out, but we'll see. Kind of gives you a little bit of margin for error with Kovanoff if he really kind of stumbles out of the gate. You can send him to Iowa for a little while to kind of get his game together, and maybe he does spend bulk of the year in Iowa, but I did want to give him the chance in the NHL. So that's what my forward group looks like. Just one free agent signing from outside the team, and that's Eric Haula. For the defense, the top four I kept intact again. Didn't make a trade with Jonas Brodin. With the expansion draft looming, I'm sure something is on. Something's going to happen with that. I'm not exactly sure what that is, and trades are really tough to predict. So I just kind of sat on it. And at the end of the day, I think that a lot less, handshake deals will be made with Seattle like they were with Vegas. I mean, half the NHL made a handshake deal with Vegas. I don't see that happening this time because a lot of GMs got fleeced on that with Vegas. So anyway, I'm keeping the top four defense, actually keeping almost all the defense intact. Re-signing Susie, who's an RFA, for a decent deal. Hunt is back. I did call up Louis Belpedio. And again, it goes along my thinking of, let's give the young guys a shot. Let's take a look. He's 24. And that's kind of getting into the range where you're almost not a prospect anymore. And no one was super enamored with Greg Pateryn's play last year. There's a lot of talk about buying him out. I don't know how necessary that is. I don't know what the relationship is. I don't know what the situation is, but if you buy him out, it's really not all that much. I think it's an $800,000 cap hit the following season. Or you can try to bury him in Iowa as well and see how that goes. He'd probably likely rather be traded, which, a team might be willing to take him for next to nothing anyway. So that might be the easiest way to go, is just kind of giving him away. His contract isn't terrible. 1 year left at $2.25 million. That's really not that bad. So I kind of have moved on from him, giving Louis Belpedio a shot at that final right-handed third pairing job. Brandon Manel is obviously in the running for that as well. He's just a little bit younger, so maybe he spends a little bit of time in Iowa, or if Belpedio struggles, you swap it out. Simple as that. So to wrap it up, with the goaltending situation, I've made my feelings known on this. You have to do something, and this is a decent free agent crop for goalies. There's some decent names out there. Maybe tops on the list is Robin Lehner. He's only 28, and he's had a really good season, kind of splitting time in Chicago and then traded to Vegas right before the pause there. I go after him pretty aggressively if I'm the Wild. You've got cap space. You've got a glaring hole at goaltending. I don't buy Alex Stalock as the future of Minnesota Wild goaltending. Sorry, Bulldog fans, but I keep Stalock around, but I also go pretty hard after Robin Lehner. And if you can't land him, I'm not super enamored with a lot of the other candidates. And if Lehner's demands are too great, I'm fine with letting him walk as well. But I've got Lehner and Stalock. I am buying out Devin Dubnyk just because it's only $700,000 against the cap the following season. It's really not, too big of a hit. And so it really sucks, and I really feel for Devin Dubnyk. But this is one of those situations where you have to make the right hockey move for your franchise versus a personal move. And that's just kind of the situation that I was living with. So that's what my roster looks like. Robin Lehner and Eric Haula are the only players I'm bringing in that weren't here before. Calling up a couple of the young guys. I didn't go after a center because, like I said, trades are tough to make and predict. And the free agent market for centers this summer is abysmal. It is awful. And the top point-getting center that would be available, I say center with air quotes, is Tyler Ennis. And we all know he's not a center, and we all know that we don't want him back. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for solving that first-line center problem this summer. I'm just not I'm kind of backburnering that because actually the free agency in 2021 looks a lot better. You've got some decent names in there: Krejci, Stastny, Stepan, Nugent Hopkins, some older guys, but then you got some guys like Nick Bukestad might be available. Who knows? So that's just kind of what I'm looking at, putting off the solving the center problem one more year, but giving a few younger guys a shot to see if they can stick in the NHL. So that's my diatribe, Giles. Hopefully people haven't fast forwarded at this point, but I don't blame them if they have. So on to you.
Ooh, I feel like you're going to be on the hot seat if you're the general manager with that roster, with your boss, who loves to have a competitive team to push playoff boundaries,
Sure.
but
Well, I think with the
it
addition
could
of,
still work.
I think if Robin Lehner is as good as he has been, you solve that problem. And this team, this season was a good consistent goalie all season away from being a playoff team. Salek was hot as of late, but it really hurt them early in the season not having good goaltending as Devin Dubnyk struggled. So I think this is a playoff team, or at least close to it, depending on how good Kirill Kaprizov is in its first year. But I'm not expecting them to compete for the division, not expecting them to compete for a cup. And that's not what I'm going for. I'm going for seeing what you have and not emptying the cupboard with any draft picks or prospects being traded away or young players being traded away. So Craig Leopold can shut it.
Fair. Yeah. Do you know what that left you with cap wise?
Yeah, actually, my cap was. Hold on. Oh, I cut it off. So I spent 73 million, so about 8 million on the cap. And that's a lot of cap space, and certainly some people would be disappointed not signing a big UFA center if there was one, which there isn't. But you also have to consider that you're not just signing 1-year deals. So I'm gonna stash that money for one more season, give you the flexibility to add somebody big in a trade, maybe mid-season or leading up to the expansion draft, or just give you some space for next season when you've got a lot better centers on the open market.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. Well, I am going to be a little bit more detailed with mine, and I've also put my roster up on Cap Friendly, which in the 10 minutes since I posted it, it's basically the equivalent of HF boards because commenters are just firing in. So I will probably not do this again, but if you want to check this out, you can see it on the Cap Friendly Armchair GM page. And all these Canadians yelling at me can, suck it. But yeah. So my first move is obviously I'm signing Kirill Kaprizov to an entry-level contract. And I'm basically doing whatever the damn hell I can to not have him go back to the KHL for one more year. If that means he gets Craig Leopold's suite in the St. Paul Hotel, then that's what he's going to get. He's not going to go back. He's going to sign on the dotted line as soon as it becomes apparent that the NHL is not going to allow him to play in the 1920 season. So the faster I can sign him, the better, and that's what I do. Basically, he gets that max $925,000 a year cap hit for 2 years before he's a RFA. My next move is I re-sign Alex Galchenyuk for a 1-year deal at $2.5 million to give him a look down the middle. And I should point out here that the kind of the crux of my roster is it's going to be a competitive roster. It's going to be a deep roster. If things play out the right way, it could very well be like the 2016-17 Wild, where they can roll 4 lines that can get the job done because they have a fair amount of cap space and some wiggle room to make some moves here, which is what I've tried to do. So I bring back Alex Galchenyuk, kind of a put up or shut up contract for him to see if he can have a decent enough year to turn his career around in the right way. And it seemed like he had starting to have a decent bit of play under Dean Evison before the pause. So I don't hesitate and bring him back. Then finally, that brings me to my first of 2 trades that I pulled off. Given the logjam at wing, and given the fact Kirill Kaprizov also plays the wing, and he's now on my squad, I have to start making some moves. So I trade Jordan Greenway to the Anaheim Ducks, who could use a left winger with some potential for their top 6, since Jordan Greenway is never going to get into the top 6 here anymore. And so I trade him to Anaheim for a 2021 third-round pick. which is about the best you could get for him.
Hmm.
So I don't like to part with Jordan Greenway, but I figured he was probably the more expendable one out of the bunch, since Kirill Kaprizov and Zach Parise are still going to be the left wingers in the top 6 for the foreseeable future. No, I didn't pull off any big trade with Zach Parise. I wasn't that bold to go try and crunch some numbers and figure out the logistics of money and whatnot. So I did not go that far as yet. I still think Zach Parise is a very productive left winger for the age of 35. And then that brings me to trade number 2, which is the bigger splash. We've talked about time and again on this podcast that the Wild have 2 major needs they have to address. At some point moving forward, they need the center position to be addressed, and they need goaltending. And I take care of the center position here as I trade for Anthony Cirelli of Tampa Bay. And in return, I give up Matt Dumba. And Anthony Cirelli, Tony is a big fan of him. Tony Abbott, who writes Ed Zone Coverage, he had, I think it was like 46, 47 points in 60-some games this past year.
Mm-hmm.
He's 22 years old, projects, very well to be a center of the top 6 for the foreseeable future. And he's an RFA, so then I immediately signed him to, and I should point out, I did use the Evolving Wild, evolvinghockey.com contract projections. So I signed him to a 6-year deal at $34.2 million, which puts him on the hit for $5.7 million on the cap each year. And basically, I'm rolling the dice on him as your center of the future and hoping that it pays out. But the way I saw it was the Wild have never been able to get that top line center, and so it's time to just finally buck up and go get one. They don't really have one in the system, and I saw Matt Dumba as much as I love him, as a little bit more expendable, and he's probably going to be somebody that Tampa Bay covets, and he can thrive because they are weak down the right side of their defensive pairings.
Yeah.
And you put him at right D top line with Victor Hedman, that's a powerhouse right there. So you figure Tampa Bay wouldn't mind losing Cirelli too much if it means getting somebody like Matt Dumba, who probably fits in more systematically with them as an offensive powerhouse anyway. So I go big or go home with this trade, and hope that the Wild can finally have that center that can complement Kevin Fiala, Kirill Kaprizov, and the rest of their young guns now that they've loaded up the roster with. With that said, because Matt Dumba is now off the books, I give Jonas Brodin a contract extension to keep him around past 2021 when his contract runs out. So I give him a 5-year extension at $22.5 million, which is $4.5 million annually, because you're not going to find much better defensive defenseman than Jonas Brodin. You know what you're getting out of him every night, and really, you hear a lot of people around the league start to say this guy can, he can play like this for a long time. So I don't hesitate in giving him a 5-year deal past 2021 to stick around. So it gives, the Wild a good start to their second pair now that I've, taken out Matt Dumba of the equation. So I have to at least make sure I have some kind of future at on the second pair defense behind Suter and Spurgeon. Then with that said, we have a hole at right defenseman. So I went and signed free agent Sami Vatanen to a 3-year deal at $14.25 million. That is $4.75 annually. Again, I'm kind of basing these off of the Evolving Hockey contract projections, which they put a whole hell of a lot of work into. So there's a lot of merit behind these numbers. And I did add some numbers one way or to one side, whether it's years or a little bit of dollars, just to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit, make it a little more feasible. But yeah, Sammy Vatanen with the Carolina Hurricanes this year, he's a good power play guy. A little bit sluggish on the defensive aspect of things, but he can fill Matt Dumba's void a little bit on the power play with his play. And only 3 years, so you're not keeping anybody out of the defense for a long period of time. Then I bring back Luke Cunnin, Carson Soucy to 3-year deals. Obviously, Carson Soucy really liked his game this past year before. I think he was hurt. Hockey was a long time ago. And then one of the ground rules we didn't go over was we did not really go into like re-signing minor league guys, but I brought back a bunch like Capo Kakinen and Matt Robson, Kyle Rao, just listing them off the top of my head. But the one notable that I did not bring back was Sam Annis, as we talked about last week. I felt he's probably better off trying to find a place somewhere else. But if I was the general manager, I probably would have given him a shot a while ago. So that's what I did. And with all these moves that I pulled off, I still have over $4 million of cap space, and I did not buy out Victor Rask. I did not buy out Devin Dubnyk. Basically, I am looking at kind of the bottom part of this roster and the goaltending as big, giant competition all year. So basically, somebody starts to, not play well, I can call or put in somebody else, call somebody up. So if, and Victor Rask, as I said, I think it was on the last show as well, I can see a scenario where the Wild hang on to him as depth at the forward position. And, you can never have enough centers, as Paul Fenn says.
Right.
So I hung on to him with the idea of buying him out the next year, which is only 1.3 on the cap for 2 years. I think that's a little bit more palatable than 1.3 million over 4 years. I'm wary of buyouts, and I'm very wary of long buyouts.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably more of the Mark Parrish PTSD, but and not buying out Devin Dubnyk. I've said this before. Goalies are weird. They're very much head cases, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
And Devin Dubnyk is going to go into the last year of his contract. I can see a scenario in which, he just comes in and, I don't know, a light clicks. And maybe I'm wrong and I can hear Tony yelling into the podcast, no. But I feel like giving him one last shot, as kind of as a whatever, you just give him a shot. And if he doesn't, there's Al Stalock right there who's still on the roster. And if Al can't do it, which not out of the realm possibility, I have Capo Kakinen sitting in Iowa, and I will not hesitate in calling him up to see, if he can be the goalie long-term with an extended look.
Yeah.
So basically it's you guys play well, or this kid's coming up from Iowa and one of you is going to sit in the press box every night next to the James Shepard Memorial popcorn machine. And I still have Brad Hunt on the roster. He's kind of a 6'7" defenseman. I also didn't buy out Greg Pateryn. He now slots in as the third pair right defenseman. It's amazing. Greg Pateryn's lasted out this contract, but here we are. if he was movable, the Wild would have been able to move him long ago. And any of the GMs that he's been under. So yeah, that's my roster. And to give you an idea of the depth chart that I tossed together, top line I have Kaprizov, Cirelli, Zuccarello. I like Zuccarello more and more after talking about it on last week's show with Kaprizov. Then I got Parise, Stahl, Fiala, Foligno, Yul Eriksson Ek, and Luke Cunnin, and then Ryan Hartman, Alex Galchenyuk, and Ryan Donato on your fourth line, and then your extra is Victor Rask. Like I said before, that's a very deep forward core, if I may be so bold to say so. You got to like that, especially if they do retain DMSN, which I just feel like more and more with each passing day, he will be the coach in 2020, 2021. So on defense, Suter, Spurgeon, Brodin, Vatanen, Soucy, Patterson, and then Hunt as the extra. I figure him and Patterson are probably interchangeable. Then the goaltenders, Dubnyk, Stalock with Kakinen in Iowa. So yeah, that is my roster. Tell me how bad I did.
I don't need to because the commenters are doing a great job of that. No, but in serious, I mean, trades are tough to pull off, and that's why I didn't venture into that realm. All the people are saying there's no way Tampa takes Dumba for Cirelli. I don't know that it's that cut and dry. I think you're right that they are extremely weak on the right side in Tampa, and Lord knows they have enough offensive talent to probably stomach losing a guy like Cirelli. You just don't know. You don't know where they value Dumba. You don't know where they value Cirelli. Same thing for the Wild front office. You don't know where they value Dumba or they value Cirelli. So it's really tough to shoot down trades like this, or even to make trades like this. So I think that you could judge that trade all day, but if you could pull it off, yeah, I'm not opposed to it. Even though, like you said, it stings losing Dumba.
And I looked at Tampa and I figured, you know what, they're Tampa, like they'll figure it out. Like they badly need a guy on the right side, and they've got Stamkos at center for the next however long. He's not going anywhere. Who's their second center? I feel like they're just locked down the middle right now. So it makes Cirelli expendable, and whether they like it or not, that's kind of the price you pay for signing all of your guys to long-term contracts.
Right.
It's kind of like the Wild, a few years ago. You lock in all these guys, and now it's, well, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And Cirelli's thrived with Stamkos out, which maybe make them reevaluate this a little bit more. But I don't know. It's a lot easier for them to get something of value by trading a guy like Cirelli than Stamkos, because you're basically, I'm not going to say you're going to have to beg somebody to take Stamkos, but
yeah, that's a big contract, tough to move.
They're not going to trade Stamkos because I think he has a no move anyway. Yeah. So
you're actually one short on this roster. You only have 22 people, but that's neither here nor there.
That's for my third goalie.
I was going to say the goaltending situation is interesting. I made the push for signing Robin Lehner. But like I said, if I don't get him, I'm kind of fine with doing what you did, letting Dubnyk and Stalock ride, and knowing that you have Kapanen there as your ace in the hole. I just, it worries me. And your comment about Craig Leopold wanting a playoff team. Well, I mean, if that goaltending situation doesn't work out for you, that's going to sink this, a lot more than me not signing a top line center with my roster. So I think it's this kind of 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. You address the first line center issue, not the goaltending. I address the goaltending, not the first line center issue. So it's really kind of you. Unfortunately, I think this kind of has how it has to go. You have to pick your battles. I don't think you can solve both problems in the same offseason. And that's if you get to solve one of them at all, which is also not as easy, easier said than done. So, I like what you did for the most part. I think it's funny, all the commenters think that, Dumba is worthless and Cirelli is God, but that doesn't necessarily reflect how any front office feels. So it's interesting.
Right. And again, this is a gamble on my part to go get Cirelli. Like I'm not knocking what he's done so far. He's very talented, but he has to do it over a full season, and he has to do it consistently over full seasons. And between trading Matt Dumba for him and then handing him a 6-year deal like I did, that's a lot for somebody who has yet to play a full 82 game season. So
well, these commenters are forgetting that Dumba's only 25 as well.
Right.
And the right-handed defenseman.
I quit reading them after I read the first two. So
yeah, don't bother. I mean, there's only a couple more than that, but they don't get any smarter. So
yeah, I basically publish this so like our listeners can go in and look and make the tables, embeddable if I choose to do a write-up on this at some point, which I probably will.
Yep.
So this was more for my own doing than it was to put this out into the HF board commenters to come have at. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bold move, and in all honesty, I looked at probably doing more with it, but I just kind of put the condensed version in because I could maybe see a scenario where the Wild take on something extra for Tampa to alleviate some of their cap pressure.
Right. Which they could do.
Right, which is, it just, I don't know, it took a little bit more critical thinking for me, and you really can't retain any salary on cap friendly.
Yeah.
So there's elements like that you really can't throw in there as well. So and you don't see my Jonas Brodin extension in on the roster either because you can't give extensions to players still under contract.
Right.
So that's the other caveat there. So yeah, feel free to check in on Twitter or Cap Friendly, but I'm not looking at that. I look at Twitter to tell us how bad our rosters are. But yeah, that's what I came up with. And as for the goaltending, if none of this works out this year and the Wild just kind of flounder around, then yeah, next year I go in and I look and I go figure out the goaltending situation. But I feel like there's more like stopgaps or, more workable solutions than finding a number one center. And I felt like this was the time to strike on that, given Cirelli's RFA status and Tampa Bay's cap crunch. So.
And also, too, I mean, I mentioned the expansion draft. That could be a place to find goaltending, as we saw it happen. I mean, look, Vegas landed Marc-Andre Fleury because of the expansion rules of only being able to protect one goaltender. So there's plenty of teams with a good second goaltender, good enough to where they might be willing to deal their starter or deal that good backup that Bill Guerin can take advantage of. So certainly not out of the realm of possibility that goaltending is easier to acquire down the line than centers. I just was looking more towards the 2021 center free agent crop, which I felt was a little bit easier to poach from than trying to make a trade with someone.
Yeah. And as for, the behind Cirelli at center, Eric Stahl, I just kind of kept, I think he's better suited for 2 center and Yul Eriksson at 3 center. And I can see those two kind of maybe being a little bit interchangeable this year.
Yep.
So it's not like, I'm cementing Yul Eriksson as the third line center. I think he has the potential to move up a bit. And then, Eric Stahl, unfortunately, probably not going to retain him after this year.
No.
Also, I didn't note this, but Mikko Koivu not brought back. Probably going to fall into retirement for him. But, worth mentioning that.
Yep. That'll be an interesting situation that plays out once the season is officially over, whether it's resumed or not. Who knows what Guerin thinks of Koivu? Who knows what Koivu wants to do? But either Koivu retires and goes home and probably plays in Finland for a couple of years, which is totally understandable and obviously a great move for him. or maybe he does come back. But I can only see that at like a 1 year, couple million, with the understanding that he's going to be a bottom 6 guy. If people even want that, which I don't blame people for not wanting him in that capacity, but I'd be okay with it as long as, like I said, it's 1 year, it's only a couple million. Let him, get one more shot at a goodbye tour of sorts, because I think he's still productive enough. I think he's still good defensively enough to fill that bottom 6 spot.
Yeah. And the other thing here, since it's more in the extension category, I didn't give Marcus Foligno an extension. I don't know if I can, like, and it's not out of spite or anything. I just feel like, especially with like Kovanov,
Yeah.
on the way, you got to make room for these guys. And I don't know, maybe Marcus Foligno is somebody you look at trading in 2021. If, I'm just going to start that now. Why not?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was our roster. That was fun. Except for the cap friendly knobs. Any final thoughts on our roster construction? Otherwise, we can probably call it a show.
No, I mean, this is fun and cap friendly. We've said it a number of times. They do a tremendous job, and their site is just awesome and a lot of fun to play with. And I would encourage people to do so. You can do like I did and just create a roster, not necessarily publish it, because who wants to sign up for anything. So yeah, but it kind of does illustrate how hard it is. A lot of people can scream from the rooftops that the Wild need a top line center. Well, going out and getting one is a lot easier said than done. So it kind of, it shows you how difficult that can be. And but it's also a good tool to have fun with. So yeah, I would encourage people to check it out.
Yeah. And shout out to Evolving Wild for letting me dive into their contract projections for this, which does help me out. Because I hate to say, to make these kind of roster construction type things and not have kind of a general grasp of what a contract for a certain player should look like. I don't want to be a completely unresearched idiot on a hockey website forum looking, saying this player should get this much money, blah, blah, blah. And so thanks to them. Also, I forgot to add one last thing to the roster, just in general. The Wild in 2021-22 are going into that season. Eric Stahl, UFA, Foligno, UFA, Galchenyuk will come off again on my roster. And then Patterson, Hunt, Dubnyk all come off. So the Wild do have quite a bit of cap space. And then they'll have restricted free agents, Kevin Fiala, who probably will, if he puts up big season again, probably want a big deal. Ryan Donato, Ryan Hartman, Ulrich Sinek, all RFAs. So you kind of have to play all that in mind as well for 2021-22 if you want to construct a roster. And hey, actually, if you are still listening to this podcast and you want to join in the roster construction fund, you too can go to Cap Friendly, check out their Armchair GM, and you can save it like I did and run the risk of being yelled at in the forums, or just take a screenshot and send it to us on our podcast Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast, and we will join in the discussion. We love to interact with everyone and just have some good hockey discussion. It also does help make these wretched days go by quicker, not go by, but because man, sometimes it's tough when you just gotta stare into Twitter and there's just nothing but regular news. So
Right.
I enjoy a little bit of hockey discussion to pass the time. So yeah, that will do it for us today. I don't know if we'll have a guest show this week. lot of balls in the air, but who knows? It's all depends on how things shake out. So if you do listen to this podcast frequently and don't subscribe, please subscribe on whatever platform you do listen on. If you are an iTunes person and listen via that, subscribe, download, and toss us a rating. Greatly appreciate it. You can follow Ben on Twitter for wrestling tweets and just yelling about whatever at Ben Remington. You can follow me for Simpsons references or James Bond rankings at Giles Farrell when we're not talking about hockey. Have we ever talked about James Bond in this podcast?
Not much, if we have it all.
All right. We'll have to bag that for another show. And then, like I said, our podcast Twitter is at GATG Wild Podcast. I also write at zonecoverage.com/wild, where we have daily content Monday through Friday for all your hockey needs. It's starting to pick up a little bit, so we thank everyone who's popped in and read some of the assorted work that myself, Tony, Joe, and Drew have put forth. So you can also find all these podcasts on zonecoverage.com/wild. So that will do it for us today, and we will chat with you again next week.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.